Hey, my name is Matt Johnson with whoismatt.com, and this video is the second in my series all about my run-and-gun filmmaking settings for the Sony a7S III and FX3. The first video was a deep dive into the menus of the camera, while this video is going to expand on that and show you all of my settings that I use for the mode dial, custom buttons, custom menu, and function menu. So if you film weddings or documentaries or basically anything else where you need to shoot fast, this video is going to show you how to put the settings that you need right at your fingertips. So you're not stuck digging through settings like, hold on, I know this setting was here somewhere. No, it's going to be right there under your thumb, or possibly your other fingers. Now to start, if you haven't watched the first video in this series, my menu setup video, I will link to that up in the corner and down in the description. And I would definitely recommend starting there because we're going to be building on top of that for this video. Second, and more importantly, if you want to save time, I've actually created a settings file from my a7S III that you can download for free at the link in the video description. And you can then load that onto your camera and skip having to watch the rest of this video because you will immediately have all of the settings that I'm going to be talking about in this video. Custom buttons are what most people think of when they think of customizing a Sony camera. The camera's covered with buttons that say C1, C2, where the C stands for custom, and so all of these buttons can be customized. What's cool is that basically every single button on the camera is customizable though, not just these custom buttons. Now that said, you don't necessarily want to change a button that's already labeled, because if you say borrow a friend's camera to use, that can make using it a major pain. So we aren't going to go completely crazy with customizations, but we are going to make some nice tweaks. First thing that you're going to want to do is make sure that your camera's mode dial is set to the film strip icon. This is a video about run and gun filmmaking settings. You need to make sure that your camera's set to video mode. Start by opening the menu and scroll down to the yellow toolbox. Go to the subheading 3, Operation Customize, and right there at the top you'll see the two things that we're looking for. Custom key setting with a picture next to it, and custom key setting with a film strip next to it. Now why are there two options? Well, the a7S III is really nice about letting you set different settings for both photo and video. Because we're customizing this camera for filmmaking, let's go down and pick the film strip that says Custom Key Settings. Now when you open this up, you may be confused because all of these custom buttons say follow custom with a picture icon. That's because the camera wants you to set all of the custom key settings for the photo mode and then have those also apply to video mode. But we're not going to do that. We only want to mess with video mode. The camera's already in video mode. Let's focus on video. So let's now begin customizing the custom key settings for video mode. Selecting rear 1 now, we'll dig in here. The first custom button is actually this scroll wheel on the back of the camera, and I don't like having this set to do anything because it's way too easy to bump this wheel and have it switch through a setting. So to avoid that happening, next to 1, I'm gonna punch in and I'm gonna change it to not set. Moving on to the second button, that is actually this AEL button on the back. I would set that to Zebra Display Select, so you can turn on and off your camera's zebras with a single button press. This is great for checking if a shot is overexposed. The third button we're going to customize says AF on the back of the camera. And I'm a big fan of keeping the buttons pretty close to how they're labeled. So I would set this button to AF/MF selector toggle. This makes changing your camera from autofocus to manual focus as easy as one button press, which is awesome if you find yourself fighting against autofocus. Button 4, this is very important. This is C1 on the back of the camera. Now I have mine set to white balance, so I can quickly press this button and immediately access my white balance settings to change the white balance of the camera. But if you're coming from the a7 III, you're going to remember that this button right here is the record button. So if you have an a7 III and you're also shooting with the a7S III, to keep things consistent between the cameras, I would set C1 to be your movie record button. That way, it's not weird whenever you're going between them. Option 5 is C3 on the back of the camera. And C3 I have set to steady shot to allow me to toggle between standard and active stabilization. When you're shooting on a gimbal, standard stabilization should be plenty. But if you're shooting handheld and still dealing with some shake, switching to active stabilization can make a big difference. Option 6 is C4. Not an explosive, this won't blow up your camera, just another custom button. I have my C4 set to zoom. And so by pressing C4, I can use Sony's clear image zoom to zoom in and out and recompose my shot in camera. We're on to rear 2, even more buttons on the back of this camera. The first custom button in this section is for this multi-selector. You can use it with your thumb to go through the menu, but you can also press in on it and it will act as a custom button. I have mine set to metering mode. This is going to let you quickly switch between multi-metering and spot focus metering, so that way you can double check that your image is properly exposed. Oh, the center button. This is a good one. The middle of this wheel, another custom button. I have this button set to focal length, which is under image stabilization. If you're someone like me that uses a lot of adapted lenses on your camera, making sure that the in-body image stabilization knows the focal length of your lens is very important. So by having this center button set to focal length, I can press in on this button quickly and tell the camera the focal length of the lens that I'm using very fast. Next up is the left button on this control wheel, and this button I have set to Gamma Display Assist Select. If you oftentimes shoot in a flatter picture profile, having this left button set to Gamma Display Assist will enable you to toggle on and off your Gamma Display LUT that's built into the camera, so you can preview how your image will look after it's color graded. Next we have the right button, and as you can see, it's labeled ISO, so we're going to leave that at ISO. Lastly, we have button 5, the down button, and this is one of my favorite tweaks to make to this camera. I go in and change it to Finder/Monitor Select. If you remember from my menu setup video, one of the things that I really hate about this camera is that it will automatically switch from the monitor to the viewfinder. So to avoid that, by setting this bottom button to manually switch between the monitor and viewfinder, the camera will only switch when you want it to. So if you find yourself filming outdoors and it's really bright and you can't quite see what's happening on the monitor, just bring it up to your eye, press the down button, boom, you're shooting through the EVF. We're on to top, almost done with custom buttons. The first custom button is, of course, this dedicated record button, and by default, this should already say movie shooting in the settings. If it doesn't, feel free to change it to that. The only reason that I would consider changing it is that if you are shooting with the Sony a7 III and you've set C1 to already be your record button. In that case, you need a button to change your white balance, so you can change this record button to then be your white balance button. Lastly, we have C2, the last custom button on the camera. For me, I love to have mine set to focus magnifier. This way, if you need to punch in to check focus, especially if you're using a manual focus lens, it's only a button press away. Lastly, we've made it to the end of custom buttons. You'll see that there is one last button available on the lens. Note that this is only available on certain Sony lenses. This lens doesn't have a custom button, but other ones do. So you can set this button to do whatever you want. By default, it is set to focus hold, which is nice because it's right there on the lens. You can press it in and that'll keep your focus from changing. If you don't have a lens that works with it though, don't worry about it. Okay, custom buttons are done. They're behind us. We can now move on and turn our attention to the mode dial. Look at the top of this camera, you'll see that you have a 1, 2, and 3. These are amazing presets that you can customize to enable you to virtually instantly change things like your resolution and frame rate. Easily one of my most used features of this camera. Like before, make sure that your camera's mode dial is set to the film strip, which is where we're going to be customizing these settings. Now we need to select which video settings we want to have for each of these 3 presets. I've already created a video that walks through my recommended frame rates and bit rates that you should shoot at to get the best quality from this camera. I'll link that video up in the corner and down in the description. For the sake of these presets, I'm going to be using those video settings, so feel free to tweak these if you want to use something else. Now let's set preset 1. Press the menu icon, go to the red camera icon, image quality, file format, and select XAVCS 4K. Then under movie settings, for record frame rate, I would set it to 24p, and record setting, I would set it to 100M 422 10-bit. This setting is especially important for any video clips that I need to use the audio for, such as a wedding ceremony, wedding toasts, letter reading, etc. I want to make sure that for any video clips I record of people speaking, their lips match up with the words they are saying, which won't happen if they're recorded at a higher frame rate and then slowed down. Everybody's gonna be talking slow, and we don't want that. So having 24 frames per second as an easily accessible preset on the camera is great to have. Back out of the menu, for shutter speed, I would set it to 1/50th, which is double the frame rate. Aperture, I would set to f4 or f2.8. I wouldn't leave this wide open, so a little stop down is good. For white balance, I choose 5500 Kelvin, which should look great for any outdoor daylight shooting. Of course though, you may need to tweak this depending on whether you're filming indoors or outdoors. Lastly, I set my ISO to 640, which is the base ISO for S-Log3, but of course, the ISO you choose may be different depending on your picture profile and lighting. With all of these settings dialed in, let's save this preset. press Menu, go to Shooting Mode, Camera Set Memory. In this menu that will appear, you'll see at the top, it says 1, 2, 3, M1, M2, M3, M4. This 1, 2, and 3 coincides with the 1, 2, 3 on the mode dial. Let's now set this as preset 1 by pressing the center button, and the camera will say registered. Now here's where things get really cool. Go to your camera's mode dial, switch it from the film strip to 1, and a menu will pop up that says 1, and there are your settings just like you saved. Press in on that. Ta-da, there are all of your settings, 4K, 24 frames per second, 422 10-bit, all your shutter speed, aperture, everything as you saved, and you're ready to shoot. Awesome. Can you see why I love this? Can you see why this is so powerful? Okay, let's make it even more awesome now. Go back to the film strip, press the menu button, go back up to image quality, and for movie settings, change the record frame rate from 24p to 60p. And make sure that the record setting says 200M 422 10-bit. Press menu again to go back out. And now the only setting that you need to change is your shutter speed, because you always want your shutter speed to be double the frame rate that you're shooting at. In this case, 150th ain't gonna cut it. Go up to 1/125th. With those settings dialed in, let's now save this as preset 2. So press menu, go back down to shooting mode, camera set memory, move over to option 2, and press the center button. It will say registered, and just like that, if we go up here to the mode dial and switch it to 2, oh hello there. There's 4K 60 frames per second. Switch to 1, 4K 24. It's so great, it's so quick, it's nearly instantaneous. Last thing now, what are we gonna do with preset 3? Well, this camera goes up to 4K at 120 frames per second. We should definitely do that. Switch back to the film strip now. Let's go back into the menu. Image quality again, movie settings. Change that to 120p for record frame rate. And for record setting, make sure that says 280M 422 10-bit. Back out again, change the shutter speed up higher to 1/250th, so that's roughly double the frame rate. And that's it for settings. Press menu, back to shooting mode, camera set memory, 3, registered. Ta-da! Let's check it out. Preset 1, 4K 24. Preset 2, 4K 60. Preset 3, 4K 120. All of your settings are saved, ready for you to shoot. And so you really only need to make minor tweaks as you film throughout the day. It is awesome. Also, side note here, you may have noticed there are more presets that you can save with the A7S III. We just saved presets for 1, 2, and 3, but there is also an M1, M2, M3, and M4. I would not recommend using these presets though, as they're saved to your camera's memory card and not the camera. Meaning that if you format your memory card, they'll be deleted and you'll have to recreate them. Because of this, I would just make do with presets 1 through 3, which are saved to the camera's memory. All right, congratulations. You have now set up your mode dial, and you can now change your settings very quickly. Can you see how much easier the camera is already getting because you don't need to dig into the menu for everything? All of this is becoming accessible right at your fingertips. Let's make things a little bit easier though by customizing the function menu now. Press the FN button on the back of the camera here and that will bring up the function menu. This is a really great visual menu that's quick to access, but especially helpful if you're somebody that forgets what your custom buttons do. You can set some redundancies in here, as well as choose some settings that you're not quite as easily able to access from the custom buttons. To customize the function menu, press the menu button, go down to the toolbox, Operation Customize, Function Menu Settings. The first thing that you'll notice from the function menu is that just like the custom buttons, where the camera gave you different settings for photo mode and video mode, the function menu also gives you different options for photo mode and video mode. Because we want to use this camera for video though, let's go down to the function menu with the film strip icon next to it. By default, all of these settings are going to mirror the photo settings. We need to customize that though. Also make sure your camera is set back to the film strip icon if you've changed it. That's important. Starting at the top left, you're going to want to set this to focus mode. This way, just like one of the custom buttons, you can toggle between autofocus and manual focus. From what I've found, it's nice to have this as a visible menu that you can quickly access and not just as a custom button. Second on the top row, we're going to go back to autofocus again and we're going to select focus area. This way you can easily select if you want your focus to be wide or zone, etc. Third, we're going to go over here to autofocus manual focus again. You're noticing a trend here, lots of autofocus stuff. Go down to face eye AF. and select face/eye priority in autofocus. This setting is great if you want to disable your camera's face and eye tracking quickly. If you're trying to film something and there's one person's face that keeps trying to focus on and you're like, no, focus on the tree over there, which can happen, having the option to turn this off is very useful. Fourth option, we got zebra display. Go to the pink icon, go down to zebra display, and select zebra display. This way you can toggle your zebras on and off very quickly. I prefer to leave mine on, but there are times whenever I really want to see what the image looks like without zebras, so being able to turn off is very helpful. For option 5, we're going to go back to zebra display again, but right underneath it on the menu, we're going to select zebra level. Normally, I don't change the level of my zebras often when filming, but there are sometimes whenever I want to see at what level a part of an image has started to overexpose. So by being able to adjust the zebra level, I can do that quickly. Lastly, slot 6, this is very important. You need to make sure that your camera is recording good audio. So go to the audio recording section of the menu and select audio recording level. This way you can press the function menu quickly and change your audio recording levels as you go if you need to. We made it to the bottom row. Option 1, we're going to select steady shot, which is under image stabilization. This is a really great feature to have easily accessible because it's going to enable you to turn on and off image stabilization in camera, but also you can enable active mode for image stabilization, which is going to slightly crop in this image sensor, but can result in more stable footage. So very nice to have this easily accessible. Next, slot 2 at the bottom, let's talk peaking. Peaking is really awesome to have. So go to the autofocus section and select peaking display. This is going to enable you to turn on and off the peaking lines in your footage, which is great for you to be able to check focus. Third slot now, we're going back to peaking display again, but we're going to select peaking level. This way, if you ever need to change your peaking intensity, you can access it very quickly. Slot 4, go into the red camera menu and select marker display. This way, if you're using something like 2:35:1 borders for that cinematic aspect ratio, you can toggle this on and off quickly. For slot 5, we're going to go up to metering and select metering mode. This is already accessible via custom button, but I find that it's really nice to be able to visually look at the menu and turn on and off this setting. Lastly, slot 6, here's a little bonus for you. You can set this to whatever you want. As far as the accessible options for the function menu, I feel like this covers nearly everything that you're going to need for the camera. So if you find that there's another setting that you want to use often, you can set this to whatever you want. But if you don't want to use it, go into the setting here and change it to not set. That way, nothing will come up. And that is it for your function menu. We are almost done. There is one last thing that we need to talk about though. Even with the mode dial, custom buttons, and function menu set up, you will still need to dig into the menus occasionally. Thankfully, Sony gives you an option called My Menu, which is a customized menu that will only include the settings that you want. I've gone through all the menus of the camera and narrowed them down to the very few settings that you actually need. So let's set up the My Menu now. Press the menu button and go to the gray star, which you will see says My Menu Setting. This is where you can add items to My Menu. Also, notice down here there's an option that says Display from My Menu. This is a really awesome feature because it makes it so that anytime you press the menu button, the menu will always open to the My Menu page. That way, the settings that you need are always basically instantly accessible. Once we're done customizing the menu, feel free to turn this on. I think it's great. Let's go up here now to add item, and let's start adding items to my menu. I prefer to set up my menu into 3 pages. The first page is the most important settings that I access fairly often. The second page are the settings that I access sometimes, and the third page are the settings that are really dangerous, so I want to be able to access them, but I don't want to accidentally press them. Let's go up here to add our first item to my menu now. Select Add Item. Go down to file format with the film strip next to it. Be careful you don't select the file format with the picture next to it because that's for photo and you won't get any video settings. Select file format, then select My Menu 1. You'll see a red line appear on the right. Select one more time and it will say added. Backing out here now, you'll see that there's now a My Menu 1 page and there is file format. So now we don't need to dig into the red icon and then dig into file format. It's right there easily accessible for us to change which file format we're recording in. Back to My Menu settings now, select Add Item and go down to Movie Settings, which is going to let you change your frame rates, etc. Select My Menu 1 again, and then for the red line, put that below file format. The menu will say added, And we're ready to move on and add the next thing. For the next menu setting, go to the red icon, go to drive mode, and select interval shoot function. Add it to my menu 1, put the line there, put it at the bottom. Added. Interval shoot function is actually a photo setting, but it enables you to shoot time lapses with your camera. I shoot a lot of time lapses, so I like to have this easily accessible. If you don't though, feel free to not include it. Next, it's time to start adding things to the second page of my menu. Yeah, there's only 3 settings on the first page because I only ever really need to access those 3 settings. But there are other settings that you will need to access a little less often. Select Add Item again, go over here to Media, Record Media Settings, and move down to My Menu 2, which will be the second page of my menu. Select again, it will say that it's been added. Record media settings are where you can set if you want the camera to record to 2 memory cards instead of just 1. If I'm recording something that isn't as important, like say a random YouTube video, in that case, I may only want the camera to record to 1 memory card instead of 2. This setting enables me to change that. By default though, I would usually keep your recording to 2 memory cards just in case something fails. Next thing to add, we're gonna go to the pink menu icon, go down to color/tone, and select Picture Profile. Add that to my menu 2 under Record Media Settings. Picture profiles are great. Sometimes you may want to record in log, sometimes you may want to record with more saturated color. Having this option easily accessible in the menu is awesome. Next setting, we need to go down to the yellow toolbox now. Go to Finder/Monitor, Monitor Brightness, and add that to my menu 2 under Picture Profile. This way, if you need to change the brightness of your screen, you can do that very quickly. Let's go on back up now to the red icon to Shooting Mode, Camera Set Memory. And we're gonna add that to my menu 2 under Monitor Brightness. I access camera set memory pretty often because anytime I'm using one of these mode dial presets at the top of the camera, I sometimes want to make little tweaks to them, such as changing the white balance that is saved to the preset. So by having camera set memory available in the menu, I can quickly make tweaks to these presets. Next, let's go back down to the toolbox and select Operation Customize, Custom Key Setting with the Film Strip. Add that to my menu 2 down there at the bottom. In the event you ever need to update your custom buttons, which can happen from time to time, it's nice to have this quickly accessible in the menu. Lastly, for the second page of my menu, just like the custom key settings, it's also nice to have the function menu settings easily accessible, so we'll also add that to my menu 2. All right, we are now done with the second page. Now it's time to go to the third page of the menu, which is where the dangerous stuff is saved. And honestly, there's really only one dangerous thing, but it's important. Let's go up here to the red camera icon, go down to Media, Format, go down to my menu 3, add that here. I like being able to easily access the menu to format my cards because I do that before every shoot, but it's still dangerous enough that I don't want to be able to quickly access it. I want to put it in its own section of the menu, place I'm not going to accidentally bump it, and then bump the camera like 3 or 4 more times to accidentally format something. It terrifies me. So by putting this in page 3 in its own area, it's a way to keep things a little bit safer. Let's go back out now, and here you have my menu 1, my menu 2, and my menu 3. There are all of the settings that you need to access for this camera. Between the custom menu that we just set up, the mode dial, the custom buttons, the function menu, you should never need to dig into the depths of this camera's menu system. Everything should be very quickly accessible. If you are a run and gun shooter like me, I really hope these settings have helped you out. And I want to thank you so much for watching through this entire video. Also, remember, you can still download my settings file for this camera. In the event that you accidentally reset your settings or your camera gets corrupted and you have to completely restore it to its original factory condition, in that case, you'll need to go through all these settings again. But why would you want to do that if you can download my settings and save time? So, those settings, available for download for free below. I will also link down below to all of the other A7S3 videos that I've made. So a video about the memory cards that you should use, or other settings, all of that will be linked below. With that, thanks so much for watching and have a great day.